You've got NVIDIA executing incredibly well on their product cycles with Blackwell ramping and really opening up new use cases for their customers in areas like drug discovery is one example.
But where we really see opportunity, I think NVIDIA, first and foremost, you have a stock trading at less than 20 times forward earnings, growing earnings over 30 to 40% a year, the GPU technology conference next week. So I think that's a really strong name. Broadcom, Marvell, Lam Research, Analog Devices. I think a number of interesting high quality names to be looking at in this downturn. And as the policy side starts to stabilize, we think these are the names that investors could come back to.
Very interesting. There's a look at all those names you just mentioned. Vivek, thanks for joining us. Good to see you today.
Thank you.
Vivek Arya with BofA.
Malcolm Etheridge, however, is buying one big name at the center of this recent market turmoil, and that's why you see him sitting right there. It is NVIDIA, which I've asked you probably, 40 times since you've been joining us. Why don't you own that name? Well, now you do.
Yeah, I would say it's probably closer to 40,000, Scott. And each time I said, for some reason or another, my answer was not yet, or I felt like the trade had passed me. And I was watching NVIDIA trade last week. Basically the entire week, it traded down to the 110 mark and kept finding resistance. For some reason, it would break through that number and then it'd be bought back up into the close. And so I did take the plunge and bought last Friday right at 108. And so hopefully this is the place, right? That's a 25% discount off its high around 148. That 110 number is a 25% discount, And so I'm happy to buy with a discount, knowing that, as you just teed up, we're in a pretty volatile space where that company could see far more volatility than it has to this point. But I feel good about at least starting the position there.
Is that a statement overall that you think the worst of the selling in the mega caps, for example, is now over? And I ask somebody who has Apple and Amazon and Microsoft as part of the portfolio as well.
Not necessarily. I think it's bifurcated here. So I think a company like NVIDIA, maybe even Microsoft, who don't really rely on the consumer much at all, companies like that who can have their conversation with their enterprise clients and that's where it ends, are probably going to experience a different meltdown if there is one from here. When we get earnings, we'll start to hear a little bit more about it. You think about an Amazon and Apple, all of the other Mag 7 names rely on the consumer, and Dollar General was out with guidance today telling us that the consumer is in trouble. And so I think if I'm going to go buying any dips here, I want to buy those that are shielded against whatever is happening with the consumer.
You have had a decent reset in multiples from the Mag 7, though, and it has been notable. If we're thinking that, okay, maybe these things are a little extended with the pullback, well, I don't know, maybe not so much anymore. For example, a month ago, NVIDIA was north of 30 times forward. Today, it's less than 25. Apple a month ago was north of 31. Today, it's below 28. Microsoft was almost 29. Today, it's 26 and a half, and so on and so forth. You get my point.
I do, and I think that is what is shaping up to create that buying opportunity in certain tech names, certain Mag 7 names, but I don't necessarily want to buy the entire NASDAQ thinking that a high tide is about to sweep through and raise all boats. I think there's still a lot of unknowns. You guys just got through naming a lot of them as far as this administration is concerned. Semis, for example, it's going to be a bumpy road ahead for semis as a category because the president's trade policy does sweep up a lot of those names. NVIDIA and others. And so I don't necessarily think this is a place you want to go trading any of these names in the semis, but I do think for longer term investors, this is a name that I'll continue to hold for quite some time. This is shaping up to be a great place to at least start to build that position if you, like me, have been on the outside looking in for quite some time.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. Today was a rough day throughout much of the market, with the S&P finishing nearly 1.4% lower. And NVIDIA was actually a bright spot in the market today, finishing only about 0.1% lower. That is much better than the rest of the Mag 7 today. The other members of the Mag 7 were down multiple percentage points today. NVIDIA fared well today by comparison. Right now, the market is still dealing with the tariff situation and also the threat of a government shutdown this week. I expect we'll have more volatility in the market due to tariffs in the coming days, especially ahead of April 2nd, which is the day we are supposed to get the reciprocal tariffs and regarding the government shutdown. There will likely be some short-term volatility, as there always is around a potential government shutdown. But time and time again, government shutdowns have proven to be long-term buying opportunities in stocks. I'm not telling you what to do, and this is not financial advice. I'm just pointing out what has been the case the majority of the time in recent years whenever there's a threat of a government shutdown. We get volatility in the short term, and then things ultimately are worked out between the two parties, and we move on with life as usual. Now let's get back to NVIDIA. Looking ahead, we have GTC next week with Jensen's keynote scheduled for Tuesday, March 18th. According to NVIDIA leadership, this keynote will be a, quote, news-packed event where we will learn more about Blackwell Ultra, Rubin, and the next clip of product after Rubin. I'm looking forward to that next week. The recent action in the market has provided what I think are some great long-term opportunities in NVIDIA stock. I said multiple times over the past couple weeks that I thought the selling in NVIDIA was getting to the point where it didn't make any sense because NVIDIA's multiple got so close to the multiples of other Mag 7 stocks that have substantially lower growth projections than NVIDIA. And I thought it was only a matter of time before value-oriented investors would start adding exposure to NVIDIA. And that appears to now be happening. This week, we've heard from many well-known investors and firms saying that they're buying into NVIDIA, including some of them buying NVIDIA for the very first time. NVIDIA has been very attractive over the past week or so, considering their future expected growth. The fact that margins are expected to rise back into the mid-70s later this year. The fact that they are scaling production of their most profitable product to date, which is Blackwell, and that there are even more new products coming soon with Blackwell Ultra set to start rolling out later this year. And as Jensen said on NVIDIA's earnings call, the transition from Blackwell to Blackwell Ultra will be much smoother than the transition from Hopper to Blackwell. I could keep going, but the point is that there's a lot to like about NVIDIA right now from a long-term perspective. And as I've said before, I think 2026 is likely to be yet another growth year for NVIDIA, which is something that a lot of analysts and managers on Wall Street are still skeptical about. Once they become convinced that 2026 is yet another growth year, I think we could once again see positive sentiment return to this stock. And who knows, maybe that will start to happen after next Tuesday when Jensen reveals more details about Rubin and the next clip of product after Rubin in his keynote. Regardless of that, I'm optimistic about the long-term future of NVIDIA. The company has a competitive moat across the entire stack, both hardware and software, that no other company is close to breaching. And NVIDIA is still delivering performance upgrades that are so substantial that their customers can't help but buy large quantities of NVIDIA's latest products. As Jensen said in a recent interview with CNBC, reasoning models that operate on Blackwell generate 25 times the number of tokens generated by reasoning models operating on Hopper, which essentially means a 25x to revenue from AI factories that use Blackwell. And so, of course, with improvements like that, NVIDIA's customers are going to continue spending big on NVIDIA's latest products. In the short term, we may have volatility due to the tariff situation, the looming threat of a government shutdown, and perhaps from the upcoming release of DeepSeek's new model, R2. Remember, DeepSeek's models are actually good for NVIDIA as they drive demand for NVIDIA's products. But I wouldn't be surprised if R2 puts a little short-term pressure on NVIDIA stock because a lot of people still unfortunately think that DeepSeek is a problem for NVIDIA. It's not. Their models are actually a good thing for NVIDIA in the long run. Anyways, we may have some volatility in the short term due to multiple factors. But from a long-term perspective, the thesis around NVIDIA and the build-out of AI infrastructure remains firmly intact. At least that's my view on the situation. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.